Open access operators, a fixture of Britain's railways that has existed for over 25 years, since the first such service started operating in the year 2000. Love them or hate them, open access operators have been very important in providing certain locations across the country with extra train services, primarily to London, that simply couldn't be provided by a contract TOC or a future national rail operation. Most of you have heard of the ones that have been successful, such as Lumo, Hull Trains, and Grand Central. However, many proposals for open access services have failed over the years, with some being rejected almost immediately by the regulating body, some being acquired by a larger firm, and one that came so close to starting but ultimately fell at the last hurdle. With Britain's newest open access service launching a few months ago with Lumo's London to Stirling service, I thought it would be a fun time to look at all of the British open access rail operations that were ultimately unsuccessful. Anyway, enough waffling, let's get into it. Glasgow Trains was a proposal from open access investment firm Renaissance Trains, which had also been one of the founders of Britain's first open access service, Hull Trains, alongside GB Railways. This proposal originated in 2004 and planned to operate direct services from Glasgow to both Liverpool and Nottingham, with intermediate stops at Carlisle and Preston, where the train would divide to go to the two separate destinations. It was later realised that it was more viable to run the Nottingham service via the Settle to Carlisle line and Leeds. The service also planned to run to Blackpool instead of Liverpool at weekends, with the service utilising 100-mile-an-hour rolling stock. This proposal was put on hold in 2005, but in March 2008, Renaissance Trains put forward its plans to run services from Glasgow to Liverpool by December of that year, with it finding 3 100-mile-an-hour paths, with services planning to call at Carlisle, Oxenholme, Preston and St Helens, with plans to use a fleet of Class 67s, Mark III coaches and driving van trailers, with it also planning to start operating services from Glasgow to Nottingham and Leicester from December of 2009, though for this service it continued to struggle to find the paths. In April of 2008, Renaissance said that there wasn't any operational reason for the service not starting. It was mainly due to funding constraints, and as a result, the project fizzled out. Platinum Trains was a proposal to run services along the East Coast Main Line between London and Scotland in 2008. The company planned to use 2 Class 180 units operating 2 outbound and return journeys on weekdays and 1 at weekends between London King's Cross and Aberdeen, calling at Edinburgh and Dundee, with plans for the firm to order new rolling stock in its 3rd year of operation. The bid was rejected in January 2009 by the rail regulator due to the difficulty of finding additional paths along the East Coast Main Line to operate the service. The regulator also noted the difficulty in squeezing in these paths with the existing ScotRail operations between Edinburgh and Aberdeen, as well as achieving a full non-stop path south of Edinburgh, which would lead to significant operational difficulties. Overall, you can see why this proposal was rejected, as it seems rather unrealistic. First Harrogate Trains is rather self-explanatory, as it was a proposal by First Group and Renaissance Trains in 2009 to run services along the East Coast Main Line from London King's Cross to Harrogate via York, with up to 4 services in each direction per day. The company also applied to operate 4 trains a day between London King's Cross and Cleethorpes, with a new station planned to be built at Donington Road, between Sleaford and Spalding, and to be known as Donington Parkway. For rolling stock, the company planned to use either Class 180 Atalantes or Class 222 Pioneers, both of which had been used by First Group's existing Hull Trains operation. Both of these route proposals were rejected in 2009 by the Office of Rail and Road, due to them believing that the service would not bring enough new passengers and thus rely on taking revenue away from existing operators, like East Coast, that already operated a London to Harrogate service. Alliance Rail was a company founded by Arriva in 2009 that put forward several proposals for open access rail services over the span of nearly 15 years. They planned to resurrect the defunct GNER brand that had been used on Sea Containers' East Coast operations from 1996 to 2007. Their first proposal was to run services from London King's Cross to a variety of destinations, mainly Scarborough via the Yorkshire coastline, Skegness, Sheffield via Grantham, Grimsby and Middlesbrough, but all of these routes were rejected in 2010 by the ORR. They later bid to run services from King's Cross to Cleethorpes, Bradford Forster Square, Huddersfield, Skipton and Ilkley, and at some point they also planned to run a Transpennine service from Liverpool to Hull. Initially, GNER planned to use Class 390 Pendolinos, but later shifted their plans to using Hitachi IETs, with the service planned to start in 2018. However, all of this would never come to pass, as all of these planned services were rejected in 2016. Another proposal from Alliance was the Great Southern Railway, which proposed to operate services along the South Western Main Line from London Waterloo to Southampton, calling at Wimbledon, Hook, Basingstoke, Winchester and Eastleigh. The plan was to operate 7 off-peak services from December 2017, with 2 peak services planned from December 2018, with the service planning to use Class 442 Wessex Electric trains that had been recently retired from Gatwick Express. The Office of Rail and Road instructed GSR to delay their application until the outcome of the South Western franchise was known. The application was eventually rejected in August 2018, due to the Class 442s now being unavailable as they had been acquired by the new South Western Railway. The Office of Rail and Road also had concerns over how much revenue the GSR proposal would generate, and thus these two factors led to the application's rejection. Alliance also put forward another proposal known as GNWR, or the Great North Western Railway, but we'll save that for later. Grand Union was founded in 2019 and put forward 2 main proposals for open access services. The first was a planned 2-hourly service from London Paddington to Cardiff Central, calling at Bristol Parkway, Severn Tunnel Junction, Newport and a new station at Cardiff Parkway. It was later planned for this service to be extended to Llanelli, Swansea and Carmarthen. This application would be replaced in May 2020 with just an extended service to Carmarthen, running with an initial 2-hourly service from December 2021. Grand Union initially planned to use ex-LNER Intercity 225 sets as well as Class 93 locomotives to operate this service. This application would initially be rejected before being amended and eventually approved in December 2022, using a fleet of bimode trains instead of the Intercity 225s. This new service is planned to call at Bristol Parkway, Severn Tunnel Junction, Newport, Cardiff Central, Gowerton and Llanelli. The second was a service along the West Coast Main Line from London Euston to Stirling, with plans to start in May 2021. Like with the Carmarthen service, Grand Union initially planned to use Intercity 225 sets and Class 93 locomotives, but in 2023 they revised their plan to instead use Bombardier Voyagers. In May of 2024, the Office of Rail and Road approved the application, with a planned start date of June 2025. These 2 approved bids would end up being sold to First Group, who would operate both of them under their Lumo brand, with the Stirling service finally launching in May 2026 and the Carmarthen service planned to start in 2027. Another proposal put forward by Grand Union in August of 2025 was to operate services on the Waterside line in Hampshire that has been closed to passenger traffic since 1966. The service would run from London Waterloo to Marchwood, calling at Hook, Basingstoke, Winchester, Eastleigh, Southampton Airport Parkway, Southampton Central and Totton. Grand Union planned to procure Class 769 trains with a refreshed interior to operate the service, and planned to undertake gauging runs along the line in 2025. This application was rejected by the Office of Rail and Road in May of 2026 due to the concerns about the service's financial viability, capacity on the network, as well as the level of infrastructure work required in order to reopen the Marchwood line. Go-Op is an open access service that plans to run trains in the southwest of England, between Swindon and Weston-super-Mare, via Taunton, Frome and Chippenham. After many different proposals over the years for such a service, approval was finally given by the Office of Rail and Road in November 2024, with an estimated start date of December 2025, although this was subject to certain conditions. Go-Op currently plans to use Class 769 trains on this service, although, as of right now, there has still been no further progress as to whether the service will actually start running at all. Now, Virgin Trains is a name that will be familiar to any British train user.
Thank you for using Virgin Trains.
I can't hear you, mate, because everyone started singing.
As they operated franchise trains in the UK from 1997 to 2019, primarily on the West Coast route, but also for brief periods on the cross-country and East Coast routes. Virgin first proposed an open access service in 2019, shortly after losing the Intercity West Coast franchise, with plans to get paths to run services from London Euston to Liverpool, using cascaded Intercity 225 sets, but this proposal didn't get very far. In 2024, Virgin put forward another application to the ORR with plans to run services along the West Coast Main Line, from London Euston to Birmingham, Liverpool, Rochdale and Glasgow from September 2025, initially using a fleet of ex-Avanti Class 221s before acquiring new electric multiple units. This proposal was rejected in July 2025 due to insufficient capacity being available on the network. Even open access operators that were able to successfully start running services had failed proposals. First Group's Lumo brand proposed in 2024 to run services from London Euston to Rochdale, calling at Warrington Bank Quay, Newton the Willows, Eccles and Manchester Victoria, but this plan was also rejected at the same time as Virgin's proposal in 2025 for the same reason of insufficient capacity being available on the network. Lumo have since put forward several proposals, including one for a revised service from London to Rochdale, a planned service from London to Paignton, as well as a planned service from Cardiff to York, using a new fleet of battery electric trains ordered by First Group in 2024, as well as the fleet of Class 222s ordered for the Stirling service, which will be cascaded once the battery electric trains come online. However, the fate of all of these applications is still unknown at present. 2024 also saw First Group's other open access operation, Hull Trains, bid for paths for a service from London King's Cross to Sheffield, calling at Retford, Worksop and Woodhouse. The proposals seemed to indicate that Class 222s would be used for the service, although it would ultimately come to nothing as this proposal was rejected in July of 2025, once again due to worries of insufficient capacity on the network. As a lot of you may know, Grand Central is an open access operator run by Arriva that currently operates two services, one from London King's Cross to Sunderland via York and another from London King's Cross to Bradford Interchange via Doncaster and Halifax. However, Grand Central have applied for many other services in the past, including a current pending application for a service from Newcastle to Brighton, though the likelihood of this service getting rejected is very high at the moment due to concerns already being raised by Network Rail. Besides that, there was one proposal made by Grand Central that came as close as any other to starting service. Remember earlier I was talking about Alliance Rail and their Great North Western Railway proposal? Well, this is where that comes into play. Alliance first applied for a route under the GNWR brand in 2010, when they wanted to run services from London Euston to Bradford Interchange, Whitehaven, Windermere, Southport and Morecambe, but all of these applications were rejected in 2011. By 2014, GNWR had agreed with Network Rail on access paths for them to run services from Euston to Blackpool, Huddersfield and Leeds, using a fleet of Pendolino trains from 2017. However, despite getting the support of Network Rail, the Office of Rail and Road still rejected the proposal in early 2015, citing capacity concerns and revenue concerns by failing their abstractive test. Later, in August 2015, it was announced that Alliance Rail's amended application to run 6 trains a day from London Euston to Blackpool North had been approved, with service planned to start in May 2018. The original plan would have seen Class 390 Pendolinos used, but this ultimately fell through, so the revised plan would see ex-LNER Intercity 225 sets being used, although utilising Class 90 locomotives instead of Class 91s. This service planned to call at Milton Keynes Central, Nuneaton, Preston, Kirkham and Wesham and Poulton the Fylde, with services planned to start in September 2019. In June of that year, the decision was made to transfer operations of the service from Alliance Rail and their GNWR brand to Grand Central, with a revised starting date of spring 2020. This service came incredibly close to starting, to the point where a Grand Central office had been established at London Euston, the Mark IV coaches, driving van trailers, and Class 90s had all been repainted into Grand Central colours, and some Mark IV coaches had been refurbished with Grand Central interiors. However, the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic caused passenger numbers to plummet, with Grand Central ultimately deciding to scrap the service in September of 2020, with all the unused rolling stock eventually ending up with TfW still with their Grand Central interiors. As some of you might know, the only British open access operator to start operations but ultimately cease them was Wrexham and Shropshire, who from 2008 to 2011 operated a service from London Marylebone to Wrexham General. However, the story of London to Wrexham open access doesn't end there. In March 2024, Alstom put forward a proposal known as the Wrexham, Shropshire and Midlands Railway that planned to run a service from London Euston to Wrexham General, with initial plans calling for 5 trains a day, calling at Milton Keynes Central, Nuneaton, Coleshill Parkway, Walsall, Darlaston, still unreopened at the time, Wolverhampton, Telford Central, Shrewsbury and Gabowen, using the Sutton Park line to bypass Birmingham. The original plan was rejected by the Office of Rail and Road in 2025, alongside the other WCML open access bids from Virgin and Lumo, once again due to capacity and congestion concerns, a recurring theme for these rejections you might notice. WSMR put forward a second amended bid, requesting fewer paths and an additional stop at Wellington in December of 2025. This application also suggested that Class 221 or 222s could be used, though given that most of these trains have now been given new ownership by other operators, Alstom have since suggested using a fleet of their own Odessia trains. A decision on this application is likely to come from the Office of Rail and Road very shortly, with a charter train being operated by WSMR along the proposed route of the service this past March, with many famous guests on board, including local MPs, and a petition to back the scheme being signed by over 5,000 people, though given WSMR's track record alongside many other West Coast open access proposals being rejected, I highly doubt this amended proposal will be approved. Phew! Well, that was a lot of waffling, but there you have it. That is the story of most of Britain's failed open access services. As you can see, the likelihood of these services getting approved by the regulatory body is highly unlikely, which is a real shame as they can often give smaller stations better services to the capital. But then again, Britain's inadequate rail system is largely to blame for this, but that's a whole other video in itself. Either way, I really hope you enjoyed this video, thank you very much for watching everybody, and I will see you very soon. Bye bye!